The Empire State. It has one of the biggest economies in the country and is home to one of the largest cities in the world. However, in recent years, New York State and New York City have seen more people leaving it than moving to it, leading to net negative migration. But why is this? Well, today on Across the Globe, we're going to look at some of the surprising reasons why people aren't moving to New York. Number 1, high cost of living. Did you know that, according to a study from Go Banking Rates, New York has the 4th highest cost of living out of any state in the U.S.? While the median income across the United States was about $70,000 in 2022, in New York, you need an average of a little over $90,000 to live comfortably. You heard that right. That's a full $20,000 a year more than what the average American makes. And when Go Banking Rates broke down the numbers, they were pretty high across the board, especially when it comes to housing. For instance, the housing cost of living in New York State is, get this, 94% more than the national average. Meanwhile, groceries will run you about 9% more than the national average, while healthcare is about 3% above, and transportation approximately 5.6%. Number 2, remote work. Before the pandemic, most people were going into the office or in person to their job sites, and this also necessitated them living in certain metropolitan areas like New York City. However, with much of remote work here to stay, people no longer have to be tied to any city or state in particular, and that certainly is the case in New York. This especially applies to the cohort who CNBC calls young, rich people, those under 35 who are earning $100,000 or more. Apparently, New York State has seen the highest outflow of these rich young people out of any state in the country, at a net loss of nearly 16,000. According to CNBC, the cause of this outflow is likely remote work, as young professionals now have the ability to work from their couch in any state in the country, or perhaps even in another country entirely. Number 3, housing. I touched on this briefly in talking about the high cost of living in New York, but this issue is big enough that it deserves its own section. Let's recap that earlier fact. Housing in New York is 94% higher than the national average. If that hasn't blown your mind just yet, these other numbers I'm about to share just might. According to Redfin, of the approximately 2,200 homes that sold in New York State in January of 2023, the median home sale was $785,000. For reference, the median home sale across the country in the same time period was $383,000. And when it comes to living in New York City, the numbers are even higher. The median rent for a one-bedroom in Manhattan in May of 2022 was $3,950 per month, and a two-bedroom, $4,750 per month. Considering that the average American's mortgage payment for a house is a little over $2,000, that number should strike you as very, very high. Number 4, high taxes. Did you know that New York State has some of the highest taxes in the country? The median household pays a whopping 14.23% effective state and local tax rate. This amounts to about $10,000 out the door each year just on state and local taxes. And no surprise here, this is one of the reasons people are leaving New York, and also why they aren't moving there. Number 5, the weather isn't great. According to a survey by Forbes, 1 in 3 people cite weather as a reason for moving. Whether this is because of climate change or just moving from a cold state to one where you can enjoy the weather year-round, weather may be one of the reasons people either aren't moving to New York or are choosing to leave it. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, for instance, sea levels around New York City are predicted to rise a full foot by 2050. With much of the city being waterfront, this may present a big problem. However, even if you're just thinking more short-term, there are plenty of reasons not to like New York's weather, especially in parts of upstate New York. For instance, of the top 7 snowiest cities according to one ranking, 3 of those are cities in upstate New York. These include Syracuse, Buffalo, and Rochester, each of which get more snow than even Anchorage, Alaska. Number 6. The workforce is shrinking. In 2020, New York's total workforce decreased more than any other state in the country and continued to shrink in 2021, even though the workforces of other states were on the rebound. To put this into perspective, New York State's workforce decreased by a whole % compared to its rate 10 years ago. And while that may not sound like a lot, it is when you consider that the average workforce across the U.S. grew by over 5%. Although it looks like things may be on the rebound, the state's workforce is still low, at 400,000 fewer people than it should be. It's not totally clear if this decrease in the workforce is causing negative net migration or the other way around, but either way you cut it, it's not a good thing. Number 7. Inequality. As of 2021, New York had the highest wealth gap out of any other state in the country. According to a ranking by Statista, New York had a Gini coefficient, which is a measure of the degree of inequality, of 51. The Gini index ranges from 0 to 100, with 0 indicating that everyone has the same and 100 indicating that one person holds all of the income. Of course, when you're comparing things on a scale of 0 to 100, 51 doesn't sound too bad, and it's not unless you're comparing it to other states. The lowest Gini coefficient, for instance, is held by New Hampshire with a score of 43. To look at this from another perspective, the Economic Policy Institute has found that the top 1% of New York's earners make over 44 times the amount that the bottom 99% make. This number? An average income of $8.98 million per year. Number 8. It's competitive. If you're looking for a more relaxed, laid-back way of life, moving to New York might not be for you. New York has a reputation for being ultra fast-paced and competitive. And while this is the case across the state, it's especially the case in New York City. According to a report from consultancy A.T. Kearney, New York City is one of, if not the, most competitive city in the world. This can turn getting a job or doing much of anything into a race to beat out your competition. Part of the reason job competition can be so fierce is that New York is one of the most educated states in the country. Here, nearly 40% of residents have a bachelor's degree or higher. Compare that to the least educated state, West Virginia, where only 24% of people have a bachelor's degree or higher. Of course, there's nothing wrong with choosing to go to college or not go to college, but the point is this: New York is a hugely competitive state. Number 9. People are rude. Obviously, not everyone is rude in this state, but when it comes to friendliness, New Yorkers don't have the best track record. A recent study by Zippia, for instance, found that New York is the 4th rudest state in the country. To determine these rankings, Zippia analyzed 4 factors: the percent of rude drivers, the average tip in the state, amount of cursing at customer service representatives, and how rude other people think the state is. As I mentioned, New York came out as the 4th rudest state. The average tip here is only 15.6%, and apparently 4.5% of drivers can be classified as rude. But where it gets really bad is when you look at other people's impressions of New Yorkers. A full 30% of people think that New Yorkers are rude. Number 10. There's a lot of homelessness, and it's getting worse. New York has one of the highest populations of homeless people in the country, along with California, Florida, Washington, and Texas. And when it comes down to homelessness per capita, New York ranks 5th, with 37.4 homeless per 100,000 people. Although it has one of the lowest rates of homeless veterans in the country, the state has one of the highest rates of homeless youth, with 27% of homeless people being under the age of 18. Even more unfortunate, it appears to be that lack of affordable housing is the main cause of homelessness in New York, especially among families. What about the other states everyone is leaving? Watch this video to learn about that.